What's up, MetaNerds? Let's break down the All-Terrain Open Transport, or ATOT. And we'll start with its main role. It might seem odd to have an open top in a war where an enemy was pumping out swarms of cheap and effective droid fighters like the Vulture and Hyena. They could just strafe these tightly packed in clones, or drop a single bomb on them. But just looking at the context we first see them in does help us understand it more. They have the most heavily armed and armored unit at the very front, the ATTE. In that vehicle's breakdown, we saw how effective the main cannon could be at long range, and the suite of terrain sensors to assess the threats on the battlefront. It was accurate enough to shoot down nimble starfighters, and even incoming rockets. And at the rear of this column we see a pair of AT-APs. The all-terrain attack pod had lighter armor, didn't serve that dual role as a troop transport like the TE, but was a great mix of that tank and artillery like the AV-7. Having this enormous heavy blaster cannon, that makes the mass driver look small in comparison, even though it's the exact same one used on the AT-TE. Since that mass driver cannon had a variable munitions launcher, it could fire everything from bunker busters to armor-piercing rounds, generate bolts to take down battle droids, or shoot down starfighters. And although not explicitly stated, I don't see why it couldn't also fire flak and work like an anti-aircraft gun, like we saw with the Geonosians during the Second Battle of Geonosis. And if you look in between the walkers, there are two pairs of ISPs. The infantry support platform was a rapid response hovercraft, with two twin blaster cannons that would race out to the sides to flank any enemies they encountered, or break through the ambush and circle back to pincer these attackers. So it wasn't like the open transports were leading the charge against fortress walls, waiting for hot droid oil to be poured on them. And they even had the boys on Slugback keeping a lookout as well. One design improvement over the Tactical Enforcer is that it no longer has a weak, flexible midsection. It does have this smaller, more AT-AT-like weak neck connection, but even then, because of the way this armored section extends over it, you still get full range of motion without the threat from being shot down from above. With aircraft being your greatest threat, this would force the enemy to take a lower angle of attack, trying to shoot at it from the sides. And when possible, a smart walker pilot could make that angle of attack impossible by using terrain like buildings, canyons, or vegetation to make sure the starfighter couldn't get a low side angle. There were 3 major battles of Felucia, with this sector being one of the hottest conflict zones of the war. Neither Republic nor Separatist general felt that they ever had complete control of this jungle world, with the fate of a battle being changed by the arrival of a C-9979 or Acclimator descending through the hot and humid atmosphere. And so these walkers would be crucial in making sure that any area that was captured by the Republic would be securely supplied and defended from there on out. The ATOT itself stood 5.8 meters tall and had a length of 14.3 meters, making it a child Jawa shorter than the ATTE and about an Ewok longer, while actually being a bit slower at 55 kilometers per hour or 34 miles per hour, and likely had a similar 500-mile range on its fuel tank. Most of the walker line used the same parts, so everything from the sensors inside to the legs themselves are the same. And though slightly different, the same goes for the cockpit canopy design and function. The forward weaponry is a pair of medium laser cannons, while the rear 2 are anti-personnel cannons, in the same style as the ATTE. And we can imagine the inside look pretty similar as well, with a gunner operating each of these guns in a large open troop section, but not split into 2 sections. Kuat Drive Yards state that there are 34 seats for troops up top, and I'd guess likely around 20 to 30 troops inside. Though officially there is no internal troop capacity ever mentioned, and so it may have just been dedicated to supplies, heavy weaponry like turrets, and small vehicles like speeder bikes and frog walkers. If there are no troops inside, this could point to another theory I have on why we see this open-top design pop up towards the end of the war. If we're keeping it real with Kuat, their armor wasn't cutting it. All the walkers were impervious to things like blaster fire and grenades, and while it's true that an ATOT trooper would be worried if they did walk into an ambush, all that small arms fire would be focused on them. But if a separatist bomb or missile hit you, you were dead either way, no matter which armored walker you were in. You can have a nice Durasteel coffin in your ATTE, or be scattered out the top like clone confetti, but the survival rate was the same. Toward the end of the war, debates were raging in the Senate over how they were going to keep paying for everything, getting so bad that it threatened to foil Palpatine's plans and bring peace.
The Republic is near bankruptcy due to the cost of this war.
Won't this bill essentially deregulate the banks? A small price to pay to finance the war, is it not?
So the ATOT was a cheaper option and could move about 3 times the troops of the ATTE. Since they would be used alongside other assets, this was a cheap force multiplier that effectively wasn't any weaker against things like Hailfire droids and hyenas, because dead is dead, they weren't more dead. And in fact, it might have been even safer since they could bail out of the top. Even standing at its highest, it would only be about a 2-story jump. Not the most comfortable, but these clones were elite, and they wouldn't have thought twice about it. And that's jumping off from here. But towards the rear, you see the ramp that cut this height in half, to around 10 feet, which was designed to be used when it sat down to deploy them like we see with the ATTE. And the fact that this is down while they are moving, not expecting to take contact, before they even saw the enemy, shows how the clones and Republic command adapted to the war. It didn't hurt to just leave it down, so just have it down all the time, and I could see the training around this being that at the first sign of enemy armor or aircraft, the troops could bail over the top or slide down this ramp, hit the ground running, and spread out to secure the perimeter, and make sure no enemy infantry closed in on the armored units. The height of the walls in this section is perfect to completely protect them from the sides when seated, and even when standing, only their armored heads, about from the eyes up, would be exposed, allowing them to keep a lookout as they walk through the terrain, be that a dense jungle or occupied city. Another interesting use is that since the legs are the same as the ATTE, it could scale almost any terrain, even 90-degree sheer cliff walls, due to the footpads having both magnetic clamps, but more importantly tractor beam tech that's usually only seen in ships, which warped gravity to create this pull, locking the foot onto whatever it was climbing over, allowing the ATOT to shuttle supplies and troops to remote outposts or zones that were first established by LAATs, letting the gunships clear everything out, drop some forward command stations and maybe a tank or two, and have the OTs come through to secure these positions. The mission we see them on in the final moments of the war resulted from the Outer Rim sieges, the CIS effort to overwhelm areas in the Outer Rim to draw the Republic out of the core, setting up the attack on Coruscant. The 327th Star Corps Infantry, under the command of Jedi General Aayla Secura, would try to capture Shu Mai, the president of the Commerce Guild. But to divert the Republic forces, the Separatist leaders set off a series of explosions that essentially held the planet hostage. Toxins were leaking into the planet-wide aquifer on Felucia, and if the Republic didn't act quickly, this would poison all life on this lush world within just 4 days. The armored column was led by General Secura, and she had just discovered enemy armor near the water treatment facility. Just as Order 66 was being broadcast, a Felucia bird, possibly a variant of a Pico Pico, gets startled and screeches past Aayla, distracting her for just a moment as her clones open fire. Partly due to her leadership style, but also just because they'd seen how unstoppable Jedi could be, they make extra sure that she is dead. In the Imperial era, like most of the CIS and Republic ships and vehicles, the ATOTs would be scrapped on planet-wide facilities like Bracca. While some ATTEs and Juggernauts live on a bit longer, they ultimately met the same fate, with stormtroopers and cargo being moved around with things like the Imperial Troop Transport and AT-AT. There was no longer the need for as many walkers, since their main advantage was that they could walk through energy shields, just like we see with infantry, and not be repulsed away like the hovercraft using repulsor tech to get off the ground. Since the ATOT wasn't meant to lead from the front, though using a repulsor craft would have been quicker to shuttle things about, it also meant that you couldn't walk through your own shields. Clones would put up portable base shield generators and be confident that enemy AATs or C9979s could not get through, since they both rely heavily on repulsor tech. But in order for this strategy to work, your resupply vehicles also had to be walkers, even if that meant they were a bit slower. But when this wasn't a concern, you did have the RTT, the Republic Troop Transport, which was like a powerful speeder, a land-based LAAT, and would be the inspiration for the ITT, since the enemy was now your own citizens, not a massive, fully funded military with repulsor tanks and their own energy shields. But on the rare occasion when the enemy did get their hands on a shield, the Empire could send in their AT-AT, DP, and ST. So that's it for the breakdown. I hope it explains why the ATOT definitely had a role in the Republic Army. And as for behind the scenes facts, like most of the Star Wars ships and vehicles, it was intended to evoke things from World War I and II, which is why you have stuff like charging tactics, exposed gunners, manually firing cannons, and other tech that seems out of place on a sci-fi battlefront. And so this was meant to be reminiscent of open-top troop carriers, everything from trucks to half-tracks. Now they only appear in Revenge of the Sith, and it is a bit of a forgotten vehicle, only appearing in the 2014 mobile game Galactic Defense. Not even in Empire at War or the Battlefront games. And there is no cross-section for it, but the other ones used come from the Complete Cross-Sections book, and there are some details in the Complete Visual Dictionary. And thanks to Fume for sponsoring this video. The easiest way to stop a bad habit is to switch to a positive one, and Fume is designed perfectly to do just that. It's Fume's goal to make switching easy and enjoyable. They have thousands of 5-star reviews from people who've successfully switched when other solutions just didn't work. It's not electronic, there's no batteries. Fume is not a vape. It's all really simple and straightforward. You insert these cores that are flavored by plants, and you simply breathe through the tube. The Fume itself has a great weight, it feels really well made, and I was surprised at how tactile and almost like a fidget device, as I found myself playing with the clicks of the airflow dial and the magnetic end cap that snaps into place. The flavors are incredible. You get to take these cool minty breaths, or switch it up to the maple pepper or white cranberry. So far my favorite is the mint. Head to tryfume.com/MetaNerdz and use code MetaNerdz to save 10% off when you get the Journey Pack today. The Journey Pack comes with 3 unique flavors, and the new version 2 Fume to help kickstart your positive habits. That's tryfum.com and use code MetaNerdz to save an additional 10% off on your order today. If you like this video, please hit that like button. It really is the best way to help me out. Leave a comment on this or suggestions for future videos, share it, and check out the membership. But most important of all, remember, when you hear a hyena, tuck and roll, because broken ankles bog down campaigns, and the Force will be with you, always.